This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Heart Mojo with Melinda Smith. Now, I have to preface this to all of our listeners. You know, we talk about so many different things on your show, Melinda, that it's really become an absolute wonder how we keep everything so organized. I think the last time we talked about a gentleman who, because of his upbringing and the things that he went through, spent 20 years in prison and was out in the real world making a huge difference, a positive difference. Well, today you're bringing us a panel of individuals, and some of our listeners may want to turn this off, but I'm going to suggest you do not listen to it all the way through, because life and death do go together. So, Melinda, who do you have for us today?
Well, this is a very interesting topic for me and my family. We have David and Benjamin and Deanna, and they all work in the funeral industry. We have a Jewish side to the funeral home, and then we have a non-Jewish side to the funeral home. So I thought this would be a very important topic to discuss because it's challenging. It's challenging for families. You know, how do you handle it? How do you make everybody happy? Weddings and funerals, right? That's where we get the craziness with people. So we want to make sure that we plan in advance and we understand our options. And this funeral home that they have is a great new option in Cleveland. It's a newer funeral home for Cleveland. And they've been able to cover the spectrum. So I'm going to start with David, because I believe you started putting this funeral home together. So we're going to talk to you first. So tell me a little bit about what you have.
So we have Cleveland Jewish Funerals. That's the name of our Jewish funeral home. We also, as you mentioned, the two sides of it, why we're here today, we also have another funeral home, individually, separately licensed, called Distinctive Life. And that's to help people that are not Jewish. And we kind of did that to help a lot of families when we have interfaith families, intermarried couples. Well, now you've planned for the Jewish couple, for example, the Jewish partner. Why develop that relationship and that sense of security? Why would you go anywhere else and have to start all over with another funeral home? So you still have us. On paper, they're separate, but you still have us, the same group of people, the same core staff caring for your families.
And how has that been received, do you feel, as you explain to people what you have available?
Oh, very well. There's definitely room in Cleveland for people are like, oh, we're glad you're here. You know, one of our investors were originally, we have a little bit about us. We have two funeral homes in Texas, one called Houston Jewish Funerals, that's been around 20 years. Another one in Dallas, Texas, called Dallas Jewish Funerals. And it's actually at the behest of one of the investors there suggested, hey, you guys should really take a look at Cleveland. And we came here. Deanna, Ben, and myself are all from here, but the primary owners, you know, they came and checked it out and saw there's a real need here. And people, everyone we meet, they're like, wow, it's nice to have options. It's really nice. Thank you for being here.
And that's how I felt when I heard what you have to offer. So Deanna, how has it been for you working the two sides? Well, you primarily work with the non-Jewish side, right?
I actually work with both. I'm the licensed funeral directors for both funeral homes, and it's what's called the actually in charge. So it's my license that is reported to the state. So I keep them separate, but I have knowledge of what's happening on the Jewish side and what's happening for the non-Jewish funeral home. And you know, a lot of times I will still office out of the Jewish funeral home when I'm meeting with somebody that's not Jewish, like a wife or a grandparent. But I mean, our prep centers, everything is separate. So I mean, it's been actually, it's pretty good. It's I'm learning the Cleveland area. I'm from the Akron area, so I'm learning the Cleveland area. And you know, some of their preferences, not too different than Akron. But yeah, I mean, it's been good. Interesting. And people seem to be, like David said, people seem to be very receptive to the idea that there's an option out there for, them and their families.
There really weren't many options out there, so it's nice
Yeah.
to have this. So Ben, how do you fit in all of this now? Tell me your
Sure.
piece.
So yeah, so I do a variety of different things, a little bit of a jack of all trades, but I really do a lot of content creation, really some educational pieces, communication pieces on some Jewish funeral traditions. We do communications with mourners, subsequent follow-ups and things like that. Jewish mourning customs really are a process. They're sort of they sort of develop in stages and different stages of mourning, from most intense to less intense over a period of time. And I also do pre-planning with people, and really get them to really think about how what they would like their funeral to look like. Making sure that it aligns with their faith and values, making sure that they pre-plan, and then of course pre-fund.
So how do you handle it when somebody comes in and then the wife is Jewish and the husband isn't, and he never converted, but they want to have the same funeral home, they want to have both sides participate? How do you bring that together?
What I would say is that intermarriage is very common in the United States. In this day and age, I mean, there's upwards that it's very difficult to determine with any degree of specificity, but there is, by some accounts, perhaps over 50% of current marriages in the United States that include Jews are between Jews and non-Jews. And so there are different perspectives on this. Certainly people who are in the more traditionalist end of the Jewish spectrum, they are not in favor necessarily of this development, but of course it is indeed a reality. It's something that is that virtually every Jewish family that I know, there is usually at least someone who's not Jewish, who is married in, is a loved one in the family, and in most instances very well accepted and part of that family. And so I think it only stands to reason when a couple is planning and working together, where even if that person has not necessarily been the most observant in relation to Jewish customs throughout the duration of their lives, maybe someone who is Jewish, we sort of use that term. But in any case, there's a very strong emotional and psychological pull towards tradition, particularly when you're dealing with end-of-life issues. And so someone may still opt for a traditional Jewish funeral, despite the fact that they don't, live a life filled, resonant with Jewish observance. And then, of course, that non-Jewish partner deserves to be treated with absolute respect and dignity, and they should have to be able to plan a memorial that is in keeping with their traditions. And that is, I think, one of the real advantages of having a division like Distinctive Life, which really is a non-denominational division. We really can work with people of all faith traditions and none. We can integrate with a church service, a humanistic tradition, a Buddhist tradition, Catholic, some people opt for cremation on that side, various other things. So, we will really work with families and make sure that they have a multitude of options that will suit their needs.
David, when you have somebody comes in and let's say they have converted, right? So that both partners are Jewish, but the family of that person did not. How do you make them feel comfortable and integrate some of the other traditions from the other side of the family?
So part of what we do is exactly the warmth and the caring. Like Deanna is the funeral director. She meets with the families at the time of need. She is extremely caring, compassionate. People just feel comforted when they meet with her and sit down with her. And adding to what you asked Ben, to make people feel comfortable, I mean, we are a funeral home. We are supposed to provide them what their wishes are. So we will try to do whatever we can, whatever it is, to make the families feel comfortable. One of the things that we do is we provide little, Deanna or myself will print up little brochures or a pamphlet to hand out to guests and families when they're coming to a funeral, or even if it's at a graveside. And this pamphlet has a nice like an obituary about the person's life.
Mhm.
It also has some Jewish prayers, Psalms, Psalm of David, different things like that. And it's in English and in Hebrew. So it really tries to have a nice explanation of what's to be expected, what we're going to say together, what the rabbi is or the cantor is going to lead the service. So really they have something in their hand to hold to try to give them some sense of understanding.
I've seen that at weddings, actually.
Right, exactly.
Explaining the traditions so that the
What will be
people in the
happening.
audience, yeah, they don't know all the different traditions. So this explains it, and then they can be part of the whole process.
Mhm.
That's what we do.
So Deanna, what can you add in there? What do you think is important when you have both faiths in one area
And
for
when
the funeral?
when I receive a family, and obviously I'm receiving the loved one um of the deceased person, so the people that are closest to them, oftentimes I will receive the entire family. So what I do is we meet and we talk about, we kind of do the get to know you. Hey, tell me a little bit about your mom or your dad or your brother or whatever. And I learn a little bit about them from those conversations. So we laugh, we cry, we talk, and then I kind of let it lead into, what do you want this funeral to look like? What do you think are of all these things we talked about? And if I can pinpoint some things that I can tell, like everybody agrees on, or the one person that's there emphasized a lot, how do we get that incorporated into the service? And then we just kind of go from there and we build it. But everybody's unique. Everybody has their own unique life, their own unique lifestyle, their own personality. And we want these memorials and these services to reflect who that person is. Because we want to remember them, and we want to do it in a way where the people that are left behind feel comfortable, with those memories.
So Ben, you mentioned the pre-planning when you were speaking earlier. What's the challenge of getting people to really understand and do that? I've been talking about it. Deanna knows that because Deanna and David and I are in a lot of groups together, and I've had my health challenges. And so I'm at a point in my life where I'm now looking at it going, do I want to leave this up to my family to decide? I want it to be something that I helped orchestrate, that I put together so that it truly does represent me, because only I know me, right? I live in my body.
Right.
Your family sees you in different ways, and you don't know how they're going to react. And I'm going to just throw this out there because it's recent. We just lost our 16-year-old cat, and my son was totally devastated. Not that I wasn't, but his reaction and my reaction are two different things. So we even made it more evident to me what's going to happen when I go. How will he respond to that? Obviously, he was devastated with the cat, and I totally get that. He's been around most of his life, but I'm mom. So how can I help him prepare for that? So what do you see as the biggest challenges, Ben?
Sure. So, I really, the ultimate challenge is really us contending with our own mortality. I think it's a very difficult subject, despite the fact that we all know that this is inevitability in life. To paraphrase, Benjamin Franklin, there are only two things in life that are guaranteed, and that's death and taxes. And from the moment we're born, we understand that this is inevitability, and yet none of us is really particularly excited at really looking, thinking about our own demise, thinking about our own death. And yet this is as natural as birth. It is the inevitable consequence of a life lived. Death, it works in tandem with life. These are integrated sort of ideas, and what you cannot have one without the other. So I do think that the most difficult way of really reason for approaching people, the resistance that we really do come across is people are just very uncomfortable thinking about their own death. And so in many instances, you'll have people, at a pretty advanced age, have also suffered health problems. And yet, despite that, they have some reticence and difficulty approaching the subject. what I do when I speak with families is I really, there are a couple things that are important to keep in mind. First and foremost is that in some ways, this is not entirely about you. I mean, this is about the people that you're leaving behind, and leaving behind an unplanned funeral with unplanned financials, without tying one's loose ends up in life. Puts a tremendous burden on the surviving family members. Moreover, they have a real difficulty in ascertaining what it is that this person may have wanted. And that leads to a whole host of problems, not the least of which is emotional overspending. I mean, for example, I don't know about your own personal wishes, but perhaps you may have a notion of a very simple casket. Maybe you want a simple oak casket without too much frill, without too much excitement. You want something that is demure but simple. And when it comes to the point of death, I think oftentimes children and surviving family members feel that sometimes spending more money is an indication of their love for their loved one, and that might not indeed be the reality. That person who has recently passed may have had very different ideas about what they would have wanted. So, that's important. I personally, my father passed a little over a year ago. When he did die, he did not do any planning, despite the fact that this is before I worked with Cleveland Jewish Funerals. But nonetheless, my brother, myself, my sister, we tried to address this subject on numerous occasions with my father, really just to ascertain what it was that he wanted. Did he want a traditional Jewish funeral? And my father, I guess I probably fall a little bit more along the traditional lines on the Jewish spectrum. But my father, I think, would have best been described as a free thinker, a skeptic, very proud of his Jewish origins, certainly having an emotional sort of connection to Judaism, but he was not an observant person. He grew up in a communist state. He didn't have a great depth of Jewish knowledge, a highly educated man, but in this particular area, he really didn't have that background. And really determining what he wanted that funeral to look like was something of a struggle. And we had to sort of feel around in the darkness and really try to determine what it was that he wanted. And my brother, my sister, and I think we did the very best that we could under the circumstances. But nonetheless, there's always this gnawing sense that, maybe we didn't get it right. Maybe he would have preferred something different. And then, of course, it was a very stressful time just from an administrative and standpoint. I mean, from the moment of someone's death, there are a few hundred decisions, literally, that a person has to make. And some of them are mundane and administrative, calling, Cuyahoga County Board of Health or whatever county you happen to be in, getting the right documents, making sure that you select a cemetery, select a rabbi, select a funeral home. And these are oftentimes very difficult decisions that need to be made precisely at the time when a family is in the midst of a very deep grieving process. And in Jewish life, we call this period aninut, a period of where the loss of the period where we hear of the loss of a loved one and before the burial. And it's considered the most disorienting and difficult time, where sort of our worlds are shattered, and there is not, things are in limbo. Our loved one has not been put to their final burial. They're not at rest. And, precisely at that time, one has to contend with a whole host of administrative issues. It's not the right time. And it doesn't feel right, frankly. It doesn't allow a family to properly grieve and face those issues. So that's really another thing that I just share with our folks, is that, do it for yourself. Only you can decide, what your funeral should look like, to make sure that it aligns with your faith and values. But it's also a tremendous gift to your surviving loved ones. And that's what I tell them. Don't put that emotional and financial burden on them at a moment of tremendous grief.
Oh, I can tell you one of the nicest, if you can call it a nice funeral, the nicest funeral I've been to was planned by a woman who had breast cancer, who had time to think about her mortality. Since I'm a breast cancer survivor, I have a lot of friends out in the community who I've lost. And most of them, because they knew, right, they had time. And they used that time to pre-plan everything.
Mm.
And the one I attended locally was amazing. She had every song she ever, it was more of a memorial service, less of the actual, it wasn't in the funeral home,
Mm.
but it was just a celebration of her life. And that's what she wanted. I mean, that's what I would want, would be a celebration. I
Mhm.
don't want it to be Debbie Downer. I mean, obviously people will be sad.
Right.
And as I'm sad when I lose somebody that I love and care about, but I want it to be a celebration of life.
Mm.
And I think when you plan, you have the ability to do that, whether it's in the funeral home with, whichever side of the funeral home, David and Deanna, or
Mhm.
whether it's combined in some way, but it's an opportunity to really show your life,
Mhm.
not your death.
So I have a
know-
question. You say there's two sides. So I'm in a relation. I'm in a marriage. I'm Jewish. My husband is not. He doesn't have any real connection to a religion. But you're telling me that when I would pass, I'm going to be on the Jewish side, but he's going to be on the non-Jewish side. How do you bring that together, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out. It feels like we're totally separate. I mean, you couldn't have the same service in the same chapel, or
No, you could have the same service in the same chapel. So again, that is part of the planning process. When I meet with somebody that's at need, or if David or Ben plans with them pre-need, that's one of the things you talk about. You can say, even though I'm not Jewish, is it okay that I have our service here? And then those are the kind of things that we sort out. Or do you want them somewhere else? Do you want them at? I mean, it could be anywhere. We've had
Okay.
people. I've had just historically people. They've done it in like conference rooms or just centers, different centers. So I mean, it could really be anywhere you want it to be. So that's the glory of it. The Jewish side and the non-Jewish side are separate, mostly for the preparation and observing the Jewish customs and traditions. There's a little bit of overlap, but we really work hard to try to keep the funeral home kosher. There's no body prep done there other than what the Hever Kaddish does. So that's where the separation kind of comes in.
I see.
And that's out of respect for the Jewish folks that are very Orthodox, and they would prefer, to do things, in a certain way.
Got it.
So yeah, but no, you can use, I have a little glitch here. My dog just jumped on the chair next to me.
That's to be part of the podcast.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The cat keeps walking over my lap.
I saw.
Now the dog jumped in. But yeah, so it's separate, but it's together, if
Got
that
it.
makes any sense.
Sure.
We want to be able to serve both sides of the family, but we also do want to be very observant and very respectful of the Jewish side. And it all started with the Jewish side. So I think that's kind of more or less how it came to be. David actually can address a little bit of that as well.
Thanks. Getting back to what Ben was saying, and what Deanna was saying, whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, the pre-planning part is the same. It's documenting your decisions and really getting it all planned out to make, when I meet with families and I say, why are you doing this? 90% of them tell me that they don't want to put that burden of stress on their loved ones. So we're here. My job is to make sure that your family will never have to come to the funeral home on the worst day of their lives, unprepared and uninformed. That's really it in a nutshell.
I like what Deanna said, though, is that you have the ability to serve everyone in the way that they want to be served. Basically, that's what you're telling me. You're keeping
Right.
traditions, Jewish traditions, that are very, very important to many people, especially someone who's Orthodox. Excuse me. But you still have the ability to incorporate other religions. So speaking of that,
Sorry.
go ahead.
And
go ahead.
customs. For
And
example,
customs.
I was unaware until I got in this business that it's a very traditional that Russian Jews, traditionally older Russian Jews, the older generation, because they did not grow up, they were censored. They had to act like the people around them. So they actually do a viewing. That's the Jewish Russian custom, to do a viewing, where traditionally Jewish funerals, you don't have a viewing. But this is their custom, so we want to honor that. And of course, we set time beforehand where they could come in and view and pay their respects.
Same thing with flowers, right? You don't have,
They do flowers.
Yeah.
Normally, Jewish people don't do flowers.
right.
But
That's a big emotional overspending part too, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whenever I send flowers, anything, I don't actually send flowers. I usually send a plant, because that lives on and it's something you could keep and it's not wasted.
Right.
If,
I'm a big fruit basket person myself, but yes, I've done plants too. But yeah. But no, that would be, David's absolutely correct in talking about, observing other people's customs and their choices and decisions about how they want their memorial, their end of life celebration to look.
And when you pre-plan, that's all documented. We have all your
Right.
notes, everything done. So when the family does come in, we just had a family who pre-planned with me back in January, and their mother passed away, and they came in and they're like, that's it? They moved in, they were there 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And we're like, because you took the time to pre-plan. They're like, oh my
Right.
God, I can't imagine of having to do this.
Make
Oh,
all those decisions
all those decisions.
in those few moments. Likewise, when somebody comes in, do you have anybody say, well, nope, I don't want it that way, even if it was pre-planned? What do you do with that person? You have a family member that comes in, mom or dad made their plans, okay? It's done. Like you said, it's written out, 20 minutes, you're out.
Mhm.
But the child comes in and says, nope, nope, I want to add this to the funeral. What do you do?
Well,
Go ahead, Deanna.
yeah, because that usually is where I come in. Somebody will come in and, say, and I say, okay, Jane Doe, your mom passed away and this is what she had planned for hers. And she says, well, I don't like this casket, whatever. So we talk about why doesn't she like it? And I will read any notes that the pre-plan has, she preferred this because she wanted plain and simple. It would be very easy for me to jump right in there and go, well, okay, fine, we can get you a better one. That's better income for us. But what I'm after is, what is driving her to want to change something? Is it about mom? Is it about her? Is this like a make or break thing for her that it wouldn't feel right? So you just kind of do compromise, and you got to kind of listen. So I always hope and pray that there are really good notes in the pre-plan. David and Ben are pretty good about it. Every once in a while, I'll get one from another company. The notes aren't as good. And then we just kind of work from there. Why do you want it? If she absolutely wants to change it, she has the right as to, right to change it. If she's going to pay the difference and she really wants to change something, or he does, they absolutely have the right to do that.
Yeah.
Had a lady match her casket to what her kitchen was. She loved her kitchen cabinet.
Yeah.
It's a great
Yeah.
I
story.
love that.
Yeah,
I had another lady pick the color of her casket because she had a red Cadillac. We had to find a red casket. I mean, she wanted
Oh.
red, and thank God she said to me she almost had an orange Cadillac. Or orange car. So, but people have the most unique reasons for whatever they pick.
Mhm.
But like you said, when they have time to plan, your friend picked all her favorite music, all her selections, where to have it, all the most minute details.
Right.
And I think what we tell families when they do pre-plan, part of what we do that's I think really special is every family we sit down and meet with, we bring what we call our personal wishes guide, our personal wishes organizer. And it's an 18-page booklet that, I had someone tell me, it sounds cheesy, but they asked me, David, how much does that book cost? I said, I think $2.50, $3. They said, I got to tell you, it's priceless to me. I'm like, that really hit home. I mean, once that book is filled out, you're really filling that out for the ones you leave behind, the loved ones, and it documents all your decisions, all the most minute deals, like where do you keep your title to the car, like things you don't even think about.
Right.
But so that's something we provide for our families, and it just, helps a ton.
One of my longtime friends I went to high school with, his wife passed away recently. in the 32 years or however long they were married, he never paid a bill. He didn't know where anything was. She did it all
Oh, yeah.
of
Wow.
it.
Yeah,
So
that's hard.
it was very hard. And luckily the 3 adult children stepped up and they were helpful. But I can't imagine, like, he didn't even know where anything was. Like, didn't know where, he still finding things he didn't know, different insurance policies that she had, things that she had that he had no idea was even there.
That- That's
So
what I was gonna, sorry.
no, so that's why it's important to have something like that.
And we tell families, don't lock it up. Do not keep it locked. Put it in a safe place, but let all your children know that you've planned, where your plans with, what funeral home you planned with, whether it's in your dresser drawer, a kitchen cabinet. My mom keeps hers in her kitchen cabinet. But
Fine.
I mean, pick a safe place, but not locked up where everyone could access it. Or maybe if you have children that live out of town, make a copy and have them have a copy of it. But everyone should know exactly so that, it's sad. Someone said to me, "Oh, I'll go before my wife and she'll take care of it," And I really
It doesn't
painted
always
a
happen.
horrible picture for them, but you got to face the facts. I mean, what if they both go out and God forbid were killed at the same time in a car accident?
Right,
Your kids need to know.
Mhm.
right. And I know a lot of older people don't want to share their personal information with their children. They, their
Right.
whole life, they were the adults, they were the parents. It's my business, it's not your business. So working in the senior care industry, I see that every day.
Mhm.
They'll come in, mom or dad has to go into an assisted living. They have no idea what kind of money they have because they've never shared it. They've never talked about it. They've never talked about the location that they may want to go. So this part is so important that you plan, that you know where everything is.
Mhm.
So I'm interested in finding out so for most people watching, I'm sure a lot of people they're either Jewish or they're some form of Christian. What happens with some of the other faiths that come in? How do you handle somebody who's Buddhist? How do you handle somebody who's Hindu? Because there's some commonality between Judaism and Christianity, right?
Right.
This is very different. So I don't know, Ben, would this be in an area you want to address?
I mean, I really work primarily on the Jewish side, but I do have a general interest in, despite the fact that, I'm very involved in Jewish life. I would think very much consider myself a person with humanistic values, and I have a general interest in sort of society at large, various other cultures. And, I think we would be duty bound. I have not experienced, let's say, a Hindu service or something along those lines. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is to really work with the families. And if they are interested in making sure that ceremony aligns with their particular faith tradition, to bring in, the relevant faith leaders that the family would provide, and, really listen and help them and facilitate that process. And that's, this is the society we live in. We live in a pluralistic United States, and there are people who sort of fall more along the traditional end of the spectrum. And then there are others who I guess you might say are more ecumenical or humanitarian. There's mixed marriages, and this is all part of the American tapestry. And I think we work very hard to really preserve that dignity of difference between the different groups. And then, of course, if there is there's also dignity and diversity. If there are families of mixed marriages and things of that nature, we want to work with them to help ensure a proper memorial that would accommodate and reflect those values as well. It's really a bit of a juggling act, but it's one that I think really does reflect our profound sort of humanistic values here, in that we will work with the families in order to ensure the wishes of the deceased and their families. And we consider that a very a holy responsibility, really. I mean, to me, it's not my role to make sure that a person's funeral aligns with my particular preferences or my particular ways of observing Jewish law. I suppose I will oftentimes, from an educational perspective, will sort of, on the Jewish side, will maybe talk about the origins, the sort of the traditions of Jewish law. But of course, we live in a society where Various forms of Judaism have evolved. There are liberal traditions, humanistic traditions, where people have borrowed, from other faith traditions, from you name it. So we do various things, and of course that would be the case. For example, I would like to give an example of my wife had an aunt, and this was before I was working with Cleveland Jewish Funerals. But despite the fact that the entire family is Jewish, and in fact I would say probably a little bit more on the traditional side compared to most American Jews, but their one aunt was very much a Buddhist practitioner, and her faith life revolved around Buddhism. And the family honored it, respected it. I think perhaps she ultimately decided to be cremated, and there is I would say a sort of a visceral Jewish response towards cremation. I think there are many Jews who don't like that particular custom as it applies to Jewish people. I think Judaism as a faith is generally quite accepting of customs of a variety of different people. So Judaism, for example, has no qualm with the fact that most Hindus will engage in cremation. That's their belief, more power to them. I think you will get some friction from some people on the more traditional end of the spectrum if there was a cremation planned. And yet, sometimes our faith values and our democratic values or our pluralistic values are not always consonant. And ultimately, I live in a country, and where I believe that people have the right to make these determinations themselves. And if that was her wish, and she did indeed spell it out quite clearly, and she paid for her funeral, that was her right to do so. We educate on the Jewish side for a particular Jewish perspective, but we will honor family members' desires and wishes, and make sure that those funerals will reflect those traditions.
David, have you seen an influx of Jews that want to be cremated now?
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to one of the Reformed temples in town, and she told me she feels that executive director feels that she believes about 25% of their congregation is leaning towards cremation and doing cremation. So more and more so on the Reform side, of course, versus Orthodox people typically don't do that.
Right.
But on the Reform side, more and more 25. And in Dallas and Houston, they say it's more like 40%.
Wow.
On Jewish cremations. One of the things I just want to highlight, you were talking about the Hindu or the Sikhs. I'm actually in the middle of helping a family plan their funeral, and she just assumed that you have to go to this one funeral home where everyone goes, because the temple is right next door to it.
The
But
Sikh temple.
through us talking, right, Sikh, and now through us talking, she realizes she could really use any funeral home. When you peel back the curtain, it's funeral 101. Whether it's Jewish or non-Jewish, the funeral directors all have to do the same job. Whether it's filling out the paperwork for the state guides, their EDRS system, they call it, or communicating with the clergy or family, cemetery, cremation facility. It's all the same. They have to do the same thing. So now she's very happy to know they live around the corner from us, that, I don't have to use them, but we could still do it at their temple. We could be the funeral home and do it at their temple. And the way this one was a husband and wife explained to me, we feel their belief, as he told to me, is we just feel the body is just a vessel while we're here on earth. Once we're dead, he said, it's nothing. So that's why they just cremate. He explained to me, so we cremate. Where our soul is
has ascended.
has ascended. So this is just a body. So it's interesting to learn the different things, and between Sikh and Hindu, how so similar it is. Like he was explaining to me the main difference is that Hinduism is prehistoric and Sikh was around the 15th century by this Sikhism around 15th century by this one guru. I forget the name, he told me.
Guru
But
Nanak.
Yes, that's it. See, Ben knows everything. He should be
I
on
know.
Jeopardy.
I know. He knows all
He's like
those
a
little
plethora of
details.
information. Guru Nanak. Right. So that is just, but all the karma and all that is all similar.
So we're almost out of time, but I do have one other question, and maybe Deanna, you have the answer, or any of you can step up. They're talking about green funerals now, meaning funerals that, oh, look, she raised her hand. I didn't have the answer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so green funerals are very much in line with the philosophy of the Jewish funerals. You have a person that is not embalmed and that is dressed in all natural linen or cotton, no buttons, no snaps, nothing that goes into the ground in a kosher container or with no container at all. And I actually was working with one of the ladies down at the Woodfield Reserve. Ben and David just toured it.
Preserve.
Foxfield Preserve, yeah.
Fox, thank you. I like had a brain lapse there. The Foxfield Preserve, and we were even talking about if the Jewish population, a rabbi or temple or even our funeral home wanted to buy a large section of land, like 100 graves together, they can actually have the rabbi bless that land and then fence it off so that it would be perfect for a Jewish cemetery. And it's all green. And then the Jewish populations that are very Orthodox can be buried without the outer burial container. It can just be the earth over them so that they go directly to the earth. My funeral is actually going to be a green burial. I have a wicker casket picked out. I will not be embalmed. I will not be shown. So it's very much in, you want to be a part of the earth and return to the earth from where you came.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
It's dust to dust. And there is, and one of the little known facts, and this is kind of where you could see me wobble over to the non-Jewish side a little bit. If somebody needs to be involved for some reason, because sometimes there are like reasons of health and contagiousness. If somebody does need to be embalmed, there's another formula that is not formaldehyde that you can use that is more natural, but is still a good preservative. And honestly, that's even with the non-Jewish populations, that's what I tend to use anyway. But if you absolutely have to, there is a way to make it happen for everybody.
So the green funerals, though, can be for anybody. It
could be Jewish or non-Jewish.
And there's really a difference between green burials and natural burials. Green refers to the earth-friendly of it. Like certain cemeteries, if they're green, they don't even use any machinery to dig the graves. So depending on green, natural burial may be where you're just natural in the shroud, in the ground. You don't need a coffin, a casket, a burial container, a burial vault, all in it, but they may use machines to do the digging. So there is a difference between natural and green.
There's actually a system, like, how you have like a 3-star system, most conservative to least conservative. There's a leaf system. Like, say if you are a 1 leaf, 2 leaf, or 3 leaf on the Green Council. So, so that's how you can find out. And I have all that information, and you could ask any of the funeral directors. Most funeral homes should know, or at least have access to that information.
Is there still a stone set? A stone for a green funeral?
It depends on the leaf status. Some people will have a rock and then they'll put a plaque on it. Some people will use the flat headstones and some people will use monuments. The place where I had chosen to go, I'll have a little plaque. I'm going to plant a tree and have a little plaque. So
I like the tree thing.
Yeah. And you could have like plaques made with chains and put it on a branch and, do all sorts of things that
they find you with GPS coordinates.
Yeah.
So if you are cremated, okay, can your ashes and your spouse's ashes be together in a green space?
I think it just depends on the burial. The commingling of cremated remain has to be approved. So the best bet, if you want to do that, and you want to do it, is to pre-plan. And I'm not pushing the pre-planning
or
anything, but just because you want to have that together. A lot of times, they sell urns that are natural urns that'll biodegrade into the ground, and you can bury those. It really depends on the cemetery that you're going to be buried at, how they want to do that. Ultimately they're going to end up being commingled, because they're going to go into the ground. The ground's going to become
Right.
moist and it's going to be commingled. So, but yeah, that's something, it just depends on where you want to go.
Well, my last question is, what's the most outrageous, crazy funeral that you've either done, seen, or whatever, gone to? Because I know there's some really interesting ones involving cars and music and dancing, and some of my friends have told me some motorcycles in the room. So each one of you, I'm giving you a shot here to give me your most interesting funeral.
Well, I'm going to start. I'm a bit of a fan of the Rolling Stone journalist Hunter S. Thompson. He was this wild and crazy figure, consumed a lot of drugs, wrote some insane pieces, followed different rock groups around the country, reported on various things. He was sort of the progenitor of what was called gonzo journalism. There was a movie that was made about him called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It starred Johnny Depp. And this guy was, lived this crazy rock and roll lifestyle. And his wishes were to be cremated and shot out of a cannon. And during the making of the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he became very close friends with the actor who portrayed him. In this case, it was Johnny Depp. And Johnny Depp was very friendly with him. And when he did indeed pass, Johnny Depp commissioned he spent about $1.5 million on this funeral, built an enormous cannon, and they shot his ashes right out of the front. I think they had like a full brass band and a gun salute. I mean, the man was he lived his life like a maniac. The movie sort of demonstrates that. It's not I don't think it's anything I'd want to choose, but it certainly was entertaining. It was fun, and it certainly reflected the life that Hunter S. Thompson lived. That's for certain.
Love it.
That's pretty cool. Anybody
Yeah.
else, David or Deanna?
Mine's not as crazy, but it was unique for me, and I was really touched by it. We did a funeral for someone who was raised and brought her family up as Christian Orthodox, but the woman was born Jewish. So when she died on her deathbed, she's told her daughter, I want to be buried by my mom. Well, her mom's, of course, Jewish. She's buried at one of the Jewish cemeteries here in Cleveland, Chesed Shalemus, Ridge Road. So they didn't know anything about, we had to explain the customs, but she said, I want a Jewish funeral for my mom. My mom wants a Jewish funeral and she wants to be buried near her mom. So we had this service where they had their priest, take part of the service, not at the actual grave, but beforehand, and just the service part, and do things. And it was really interesting. She said, wait, does that mean, the daughter says to me, wait, before that started, does that mean I'm Jewish? I said, yes, your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. She goes, so my kids are Jewish? She goes, yes. And she got a real kick because her son put on a yarmulke here in the funeral home. And when we did the actual service at the grave, the Jewish Sacred Society helped organize that, because they do a lot of burials. That's their cemetery. And he told me and introduced them to, we have the service done in traditional Hebrew and translated into English. And he explained to them, and I explained to them, that this man who he picked, they picked a man to come to say Kaddish, the Mourner's Kaddish prayer, which is customary to say for a whole year, 11 months, that to say this for this woman who passed away, who led her life not as a Jewish person, but she died as a Jew. And she was born Jew, and she went on to the next world as a Jew. And I was really touched. And it's traditional to have a minyan, a quorum of 10 men, to 10 people, but 10 men for Orthodoxy. And he arranged from the Chesed Chaver Kaddish, Jewish Sacred Society, middle of the afternoon, all of a sudden you got 10 Orthodox Jewish guys coming to help make a minyan for this lady.
How
And I just thought
wonderful.
it's so unique. And the woman who survived, the daughter and her husband, they just kept telling me afterwards. I met with them, about a month later. I brought them the death certificates a few weeks later, and she told me how touched she was by the Jewish faith and how similar, she said, how similar to her, the Christian Orthodox
Mhm.
and Jewish religion is. And she was just touched, which touched me, gave me warm fuzzies.
Hey, Deanna, you got a quickie?
All right.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
We're
I'm
running over today. Who knew this would go so long? Go ahead.
I'll try to talk fast but understandable. As a funeral director, I have had the pleasure of having to drag motorcycles into a building, big, large statues of Captain Morgan in the building. You
That's
know,
my kind of funeral, Captain
I'm
Morgan.
telling you what, we could do it. But I think my favorite was, because I'm all about the personalization. My favorite was we had a young lady that passed away from leukemia. She was 14, I believe.
Mhm.
And I worked with the mother, and the mom just really needed to be a part of making this about her daughter. So we literally rearranged the front lobby of the funeral home, the chapel. We chose I helped her choose a cremation casket. She had the kids all write their names all over the caskets, like that were visiting. We had a mom at the door collecting the cell phones. And the girl was very sports minded and outdoorsy. So we did the final service, not in a church, but I found a place, like a little resort type place that allowed us to do an outdoor service. And we rented out bleachers and had it out in the field. It was gorgeous. We had live music, the whole bit. And I think that was
That's lovely.
my most memorable one. And you know what? It was a lot of work. And she gave me, I think, 3 or 4 days to pull it together. But you know what? We did it. We did it. And to this day, I can still remember all those kids wrapped around the funeral home coming in to see their buddy that passed.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, who knew that we would spend this much time? Seriously. And for those of you watching, it wasn't that bad, was it? It was a challenge, that we all have to face.
Absolutely.
And that's part of our life's journey. And you three make this easier for people. And I commend you for that, because I know how difficult it is for families.
Mhm.
So this was an interesting way to start the Jewish New Year, Lashana Tova, to start talking about this, but I think it was appropriate to go
Thank
into
you
the
for
new year.
having us.
What do you think, Karen?
Well, I know my husband and I have to have a very long talk here real soon. We did all of our other paperwork last year at this time, so I think this is getting a little bit closer. But I know that my family did all their pre-planning, and it was so much easier for my brothers and I to know that everything was done the way our parents wanted it done. So it's important.
So,
And
It really is.
so how do they reach out to you? That's how can
Absolutely.
somebody get a hold of you?
They could call the office. Cleveland Jewish Funerals is 216-340-1700, or you can,
1400.
didn't I say that?
You said
No.
one.
Oh, it's 1400. Sorry. Distinctive Life, you could just call the Cleveland Jewish Funeral Home and we'll do all the work for you. Or you can go online on our website and there's a contact us on the drop down menus.
What's the website, David?
It's clevelandjewishfunerals.com.
Okay.
And if you forgot all that, it will be in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about it. Or you can contact us at newclevelandradio@gmail.com, and we will put you in touch with one of these 3 lovely people. Thank you. I'm so glad
Thank
I got
you.
to meet you.
Thank you for
Lashana
being
Tova
on.
to all of you. And
Lashana Tova
let's
to
make it a good year.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks
Bye-bye
for
now.
having
Thanks.
us. And
Yeah.
feel
Thank you.
free to call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.